Welcome back to my TV program, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the best fantasy novel I have read in the last 20 years, and that is Into the Narrowdark by Tad Williams, book number 3 in his last King of Osten Ard 4-book epic fantasy series. I'm serious, folks. Not since I read A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin, which came out in about 2001, have I been this fully engrossed in a fantasy novel. I drank in every single glorious word of this book, and I loved every minute of it. Now, I bought this on Friday. It's technically not coming out on Tuesday, but I went into the Barnes & Noble and I asked them if I could buy it early, and they said, well, it's not a strict on sale book, so yes, you can buy it early. So I bought it Friday. I read it over the weekend. In fact, that's all I did this weekend, was read this book. And now I'm here to give you my extremely enthusiastic review of this super fucking dope ass book. Oh my God, I love it. Let's talk about the covers first. You know, we talk about graphic design and book cover illustration at the beginning of every book review, because I think that the book covers are a huge part of the entire package of a physical book. So let's talk about this one. Now, for starters, it's clearly not a Michael Whelan illustration. Most every Tad Williams novel here has got just a gorgeous Michael Whelan illustration. Whether it's his Otherland books or his Shadow March books. I mean, Michael Whelan and Tad Williams has been linked together since the 1980s. So, now we've got a cover by a gentleman, I guess it's a gentleman, named Jim Tierney. I think it's serviceable. I mean, it does the job. I think it's cool. It's all right. It's just not Michael Whelan. I was hoping for Michael Whelan. I enjoy Michael Whelan's work. I don't know exactly why a Michael Whelan painting is not gracing this cover, as it graces all my Tad Williams books. And I've got every Tad Williams book imaginable right there. But anyway, maybe Michael Whelan wasn't available. Maybe he costs too much. I mean, he is a master artist. His work's probably pretty expensive. Irregardless, or regardless, however you want to pronounce that word, we get this cover, and I like it. Not as much as Whelan. No offense to the artist that did this. This is a very good cover. But Michael Whelan and Tad Williams, they go hand in hand. Anyway, not only do we get a decent cover, we get a great map here, if I can find it. Actually, there's a bunch of great maps done by the wonderful map maker Isaac Stewart, who's also a friend of mine. I know Isaac Stewart. He lives here near me in Utah. He also does a lot of the Brandon Sanderson maps. If you read the Stormlight archives, all that. You know, I mentioned that Isaac Stewart's a friend of mine. I actually consider Tad Williams a friend of mine. And as I do most all the time, as I show off my signed books, Tad Williams has signed most of his books to me. We do share the same literary agent. We have met. We've actually did a Comic-Con panel together, which you can look up on my YouTube channel elsewhere. Just type in writing discussion, Tad Williams, Brian Lee Durfee, and that hour-long discussion between me and Tad Williams and our literary agent will show up magically on your YouTube screen. So, we've got from the cover to the maps. We haven't even started on this cool book yet. It's also got a great synopsis of the series so far. We've got the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy, which is a must-read. And then we've got the Last King of Osten Ard 2 books. There's a great synopsis of those 2 books in the beginning of this, so if you're easily lost, I didn't need the synopsis because I've read these first 2 books twice each, so I was very familiar with all the characters and all the plot points and plot lines going forward. In fact, I read them both once each, and then I listened to them both on audible.com once each. So technically that's reading them twice each, if you follow the math and the logic. Anyway, let's talk about this book and why I think it's the best fantasy novel I have read in the last 20 years, since The Storm of Swords came out. I mean, I loved The Witchwood Crown. Loved it. I loved Empire of Grass. Loved it. But this steps the whole thing up to an extra gear, an extra level. I was thrilled with everything going on in this. Starting at the front, I mean, let's talk about our 3 main characters. There's Morgan, who is the grandson of Simon and Miriamel. I think that's the way to pronounce her name, I don't know. We'll just call her Miri. So Simon, Miri, and Morgan are the 3 pretty much main characters of this story. And they are who we follow. So I won't belabor you with a synopsis myself of these 2 books. Actually, I've reviewed these 2 books elsewhere on my channel. If you want to watch those reviews, just type in my last name, Witchwood Crown, or Empire of Grass into your YouTube, and it'll come up, and you can watch those reviews. So we will just begin where this begins, which is with Morgan, the grandchild, sort of the bratty teenage grandchild of Simon and Miri. He has been taken captive by a Norn, a female Norn. And this is actually my favorite storyline in the whole thing. I was gripped by all the storylines, but none more so than Morgan traveling along with the Norn. And I absolutely loved it. This female that he was traveling with is just more of a badass than he is. He realizes a lot of what he's lacking in himself just through how just awesome of a fighter this girl is, and how she can just sort of I mean, they get into a gruesome fight. Well, at the beginning there's a gruesome fight with some big dogs. Then they're in the tunnels. They go into the Narrowdark, which is what they eventually get to the Narrowdark. But it's just such a great storyline. And then we jump to the tragedy of Simon has suffered great tragedy in his life, and he's being a lot more pissy and belligerent than we've ever seen him before. I mean, even in the Dragonbone chair, he was sort of a whiny teenage kid. He kind of reverts a little bit back to that because he suffered this tragedy. He's wondering why God and the universe is against him, and people are trying to talk him out of it because he is the king and he needs to lead the charge in a war that's coming up. I mean, the soldiers need a leader, and can Simon step up and be that leader? And that's kind of where he is. And then we've got and some of the characters that are trying to help him through this are from the original trilogy, like Eolair and that. But then we get Miriamel, or Miri. She's a prisoner. She's been taken prisoner by this demented sort of madman. And that is like just crazy because you just never quite know. You never quite catch your footing with this book, knowing what exactly is going on with every character and every storyline. There's just an underlying tone of mystery to everything, especially when, in my favorite parts, when Morgan and Narazu, the Norn that he's with, are in they spend so much time being chased through these caverns and tunnels. It's sort of like a mix between the Mines of Moria and the Fellowship of the Ring, and almost Stephen King's Tommyknockers, if I dare say. Because I don't honestly know a lot of what I'm reading about, because the way that Tad Williams is describing some of these action sequences, you actually don't know what's coming out of the dark and fighting with these people and these Norns, because it's mystery. And I'm wondering, I'm just speculating, but I don't want to speculate and make you speculate about my speculate. So I will leave my speculating. You can read it for yourself, and you can look at those scenes when Morgan and Narazu are being chased through the Narrowdark, and things are coming out of the darkness and mist and smoke at them, and they just can't describe it, but it's very loud and thunderous and just overpowering. Those scenes literally shook me to my core. I actually had to reread a few of them 3 or 4 times over just to be like, have I missed something? What is Tad Williams trying to describe here? What is it? And I know that he's purposefully leaving it as a mystery, because I want to find out in book 4 what these things are, because these, whatever they are, they're just badass and otherworldly and out of this world. I mean, I don't even know what to think. And they make their way to this tower. It's called the Tower of the Reaching Hand, and it's so they're tunneling. Morgan and Narazu are tunneling under Dia Chiquiza, one of the ancient Scythi cities. Which, by the way, the mysteries of these ancient Scythi ruins run far deeper than we ever could have imagined in the original trilogy or these books. I mean, there are secrets that are emerging out of these ancient Scythi cities that I don't know where Tad Williams is going with it, but I'm certainly breathtakingly along for the ride. And they reach the top of they through the tunnels of Dia Chiquiza, and it's just a labyrinth of tunnels, and they're being chased the whole time. And then they come out onto the Tower of the Reaching Hand, and at that point I was like, that is the scene that Michael Whelan should have painted for this cover. It would have been so awesome, because I just love everything about that scene. And it would have just fit in so nicely with all of his other covers. Anyway, I digress. There's literally 2 characters that meet up in this book. I'll just say who they are. They're Simon and Unver, the Horse Lord, the Grass Lord, the Horse Lord. Simon and Unver, they have this epic meeting, literally a heart-stopping meeting, literally. And I was just, my breath was taken away, and I was like, oh my God, that couldn't have just happened. And it's halfway in through the book. I'm like, no, please, no. One of the most well-written scenes in the history of fantasy writing, just because I was so invested in these 2 characters, that when they finally got together and the aftermath and what happens through the rest of the book, I was just, I couldn't believe it, still can't believe it. Looking forward, here's the deal. When I finished Stone of Farewell, way back when I was a kid, I had to wait 3 years for To Green Angel Tower to come out. It was the most excruciating 3 years of my life. And now I've got to wait for book 4 to come out, which is called Navigator's Children or something like that. I've got to wait for that to come out. And it's going to be the most excruciating wait of my life. I think it might be out sooner than 3 years. I think he's mostly written it, so I think it's going to be out soon. In fact, I think it might be out. Yeah, I think it's going to be out next summer or something like that. Anyway. OMG. OMFing-G is all I gotta say about this book. My favorite fantasy novel in the last 20 years, folks. That's how much this series means to me. I loved Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. The Last King of Osten Ard is quite possibly gonna top it. Absolutely, quite possibly going to supersede the original trilogy, which is insane because the original trilogy ranks in the top 5 of my most favorite fantasies of all time. If you've seen my video of my top 30 favorite fantasies of all time, you know exactly where this series finishes. And it finishes really high on the list. And if this series can actually outdo it, it's like an accomplishment that, oh. Anyway, Tad Williams, Into the Narrowdark. Everybody start reading this series. Start with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Read those three, and then pick up the Witchwood Crown, and then pick up Empire and Grass, and those build up to this book, which is just on fire. If there was, I give novels 10s out of 10s. If they're great, they get a 10 out of 10. If I could give this 100 out of 10, I would. That's how much I loved it.